I was up here, one of those officers up there. I was armed with a rifle that day, so I didn't want to go down in the crowd and potentially have it used or taken. If these are the people that are going to be getting pardons, can you look at this and just say they deserve one? I don't see how.
But President-elect Donald Trump has indicated that he might do just that.
First day.
Yeah, I'm looking first day.
Issue these pardons.
These people have been there, how long is it, 3 or 4 years?
Okay.
Pardons are one of the president's greatest powers, but also biggest political liabilities.
And that's what they are, as hostages. They've been treated terribly.
He created expectations, created a movement of people, created a mob that acted, and then walked away. I hope he doesn't walk away from these promises.
Here's what Trump would have to do to carry out those promises and what it means for the people involved in the January 6th attack.
So I still served at the Capitol for 3 years after the insurrection. I left to run for Congress in a fight to continue to hold Donald Trump accountable. When I was unsuccessful, I became a surrogate for first Joe Biden and then switching over to Kamala Harris. I think that anybody who had anything to do with these incidents of that day need to be held accountable.
Of the nearly 1,600 January 6th defendants, all have been charged with some form of trespassing or disorderly conduct, and more than a third have been charged with crimes involving assaulting, resisting, or obstructing law enforcement.
What we went through that day wasn't normal, and we shouldn't normalize it.
Save your country!
A spokeswoman for Trump's transition team said in a statement to the Wall Street Journal that Trump will pardon Americans who were denied due process and unfairly prosecuted by the weaponized Department of Justice.
I know the system. The system's a very corrupt system.
She also said in a separate statement that pardons will happen on a case-by-case basis, but didn't give any details on who might receive them or when. A number of people accused in the attack are already lobbying the president-elect for pardons. One is Joseph Biggs, a leader of the far-right group The Proud Boys, which played a central role in the Capitol riot. He can be seen at the Capitol in footage from that day.
Hey, we're on the concrete side, the east side of the Capitol front steps.
Biggs was found guilty of seditious conspiracy, along with several other charges. Court records state that he and other group members helped recruit and lead a crowd that breached the Capitol. Biggs is currently serving a 17-year sentence.
Biggs, what you gotta say?
Dear Mr. President,
His lawyer, Norm Pattis, sent Trump a letter a week after the election.
you are now in a position to close a painful chapter in American history. On behalf of Joe Biggs, I am urging you to do so by granting Mr. Biggs' request for a complete pardon for his actions that day. I've heard all sorts of hand-wringing about January 6th. Prosecutors, judges referring to it as an attack on the citadel of democracy. But January 6th wasn't an incendiary event. It was one afternoon's riot. There were some injuries. There was a little bit of property damage. There was the national pride. Our national pride was wounded, and the peaceful transition of power was imperiled for an hour or two. And for this, we're going to fill the prisons.
The prosecutions have necessarily focused on the actions of the individuals charged, not the collective harm done by the thousands of people who were simultaneously committing crimes that day.
The idea behind a pardon is that the criminal justice system sometimes gets it wrong and can be quite harsh, and there needs to be a fail-safe mechanism to ensure injustices are addressed.
Kim Whaley is a law professor who wrote a book on the history of pardon power. She says the modern pardon process usually works like this.
There is, within the Department of Justice, an Office of the Pardon Attorney. Someone who is seeking a pardon or commutation fills out the form. It has a bunch of criteria that include acceptance of responsibility, for example. Those pardon attorneys sort through about 10,000 for every 4-year presidential term, make recommendations to the president, and the president can either accept or reject.
But presidents can bypass this process entirely, which also bypasses application guidelines, like one that states convicts are only eligible 5 years after the end of their sentence.
Those aren't constitutional requirements. Those are Justice Department requirements. And forgive me if I'm a little cynical about the Justice Department. I'm not going to the same fox who locked me up saying, "Can you open the chicken coop door?"
While not all pardons that bypass the typical process are controversial, presidents from both sides of the aisle have issued controversial pardons this way, some that left a lasting mark on their presidencies.
Typically, presidents get in trouble when they don't follow any sort of Justice Department process.
Alex Conant is a Republican strategist who worked for Marco Rubio.
When a president uses a pardon to explicitly benefit a political donor or friend, something that your average citizen wouldn't be considered for, that rubs people the wrong way.
Trump issued a number of pardons this way during his first term.
Did the pardon of Sheriff Joseph Arpaio go through the pardon attorney office?
I don't believe it did.
And President Joe Biden recently issued a broad pardon of his son Hunter for tax evasion and lying about drug use. Biden had previously said,
"Have you ruled out a pardon for your son?"
Yes.
Nobody likes paying taxes, and you shouldn't get a pass if you're a president's son. And I think Biden's pardons help the J6 case.
I think the fact that Biden has so aggressively used his pardon powers in the final months of his presidency clearly makes it easier for Trump to similarly use the pardon powers as he assumes the presidency. If for no other reason, Republicans will be able to point back at what Biden did and to say Trump is no worse than Biden.
But for Trump, the potential ramifications of January 6th pardons are difficult to predict.
We've never had an event like January 6th, so I think pardoning the people that were part of it would be unprecedented by nature.
This is a groundbreaking concept of pardoning people who violently stormed the Capitol to try and wrest power from a legitimate government and hand it to the loser of an election.
A pardon kind of, this may not be the word, but it excuses that behavior, or it says it's okay. So what is to stop them from doing something like that again?
And it's unclear what kind of pushback Trump will receive within Washington.
I think members of Congress have a very different perspective on January 6th than Donald Trump because a lot of them were there. They remember what happened that day, and some of them are scarred by it. And so I don't think that they're going to be cheering Donald Trump's pardons, but they also aren't in a position to fight it.
But those J6 warriors, they were warriors, but they were really more than anything else. They're victims of what happened.
One of the questions I have is whether there will be a blanket pardon, an amnesty pardon, or whether there will be selective pardons based on perceived loyalty.
I would say it will be a large portion of them. They did and it'll be very early on.
Joe Biggs risked his life for this country and was injured, awarded a Purple Heart, and he lost his pension for participating in a riot. That's just wrong.
I mean, this has been 4 years consuming of my life. I wish I was still working at the U.S. Capitol. I wish I was still there, and we didn't have to live that ugly day that happened. But now it is a part of our history. It's not going away. I think it's important to not let people rewrite what did and did not happen that day.
The next chapter will be written when Donald Trump takes the oath of office again and decides which January 6th participants will benefit from the president's extraordinary power.
Whenever you pardon somebody who has been convicted of hurting law enforcement, whether it's the January 6th case or anything else, I think that is going to be politically more difficult to explain.